Hi, everyone. So it's like right when it starts recording how you start it. So this is our UK Fellowships info session. If you wanted to go to the UK and are interested in graduate study, you were in the right place. We are the Center for Research and Fellowships. It is the two of us. I guess this goes to my next slide. Here we have some nice pictures of, your UK. Is this Cambridge? This one looks like Cambridge. UK campuses, but we are Laura and Lauren. So pretty much if you say Lore, you got one of us. We actually split up advising on the UK fellowships by last name. So I will be working with those last names beginning with M through Z, representing the last half of the latter half of the alphabet. Lauren, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, welcome. My name is Lauren Tuckley, and because I lived my life in the back half of the alphabet, I decided to take the first half and have enjoyed working with the first half of the alphabet and vicariously living through the people that got to go first all their lives. So yay for team A through L.
And we are normally in non-pandemic times in Gervais. I'm curious, how many people here know where Gervais is? Can we take a little?
Yeah, these are upperclassmen. We should know this. Come on. Yes.
But I know they haven't been on campus in over a year now.
I know. Forget everything. You're going to be like, it's going to be like going to school for the first time again if you get to come back, right? This next year.
Well, just to orient you, if you don't know where Gervais is, this is what it looks like, but you may have passed it by many a time and not realized that that's where a lot of the magic was happening. We are right across from the meditation hall, meditation center, and diagonally across from the Healy Family Student Center. So along that way. We occupy the ground floor, garden level, I guess you could say. But for the near term, we are virtual. We will continue to be virtual, coming at you from your computer or phone screen. Okay.
Get vaccinated.
Get vaccinated.
Sorry, that sounded like a non sequitur, but it was sort of like, we want to see all you guys back in person, but we want to see you guys healthy and safe. So
yeah.
It's my PSA for the day.
So before we jump into talking about the fellowships themselves, we want to spend a bit of time first talking about what to us is the most important aspect of this experience and the value in applying to one of these fellowships, which is the process itself. We will always tell you that we work with more people who don't receive these fellowships than do. And for us, the value comes from spending the time and effort to think through your experiences, your background, your interests, kind of your vision and trajectory for yourself, and piece together that narrative. Take stock of your candidacy. So this process is oriented around really extensive reflection and discernment. And the people who go through this process, whether they receive the fellowship or not, walk away with that, I think, refined sense of purpose and commitment to what they're interested in doing. So if you are sitting here thinking, man, I would love to learn how to tell my story. I would love to think about where I want to go in my kind of career. What are the options that are available to me? What are the kinds of ways in which I can chart my future? If you are sitting here and you think that is me, then this is the experience for you. You put in a lot of effort. We're not going to lie and say like this is, just like a walk in the park. This does take extensive work. And we'll get into kind of like the internal endorsement process and then the process that follows that. I mean, this is like months long of effort. So you put in a lot into this, but you get in, I think, as much as you get out as much as you put in. So clarity of purpose, storytelling. Lauren, if you want to take another part of this.
Yes, that was a great tag team. Excellent. I'm in. All right. So just to really, again, we want to start here. We want to start here and emphasize this. Okay, you got out an email and you're like, yes, free graduate study in the UK. Excellent. I want that. That's great. We're going to help you work towards that, but that's not what we're doing here. What we are doing here is subverting the actual process of applying for a fellowship, but investing in your development, your talents, and your commitments in a way that hopefully moves you to really think strategically about your long-term goals and what kind of difference you want to make in the world. And when we say that, we're not just like, oh, we have our mission statement and we're done. Like, we've gotten so far, in the beginning, here's the story. In the beginning, it's like, oh yeah, okay, your job is to help students apply for fellowships. So fine, like, let's figure out how to do that. But along that way, we realized that what was more profoundly important to our work and to working with students was to use that application process as a vehicle to help you figure out your shit and to figure out it in a way that makes a difference and where we interrogate the values by which you're doing things. And hopefully you get on the other side of having gone through an intensive process through the UK fellowship one. It's one of our most, if not the most intensive development process. And you come out on the other end and like, you go or you don't get an interview, you get an interview, don't, whatever. You get out of the interview, you get it, you don't care. At the end of the day, what we're preparing you for is to really like try to bring that pitch together. And in that pitch we're gonna kind of really hold you accountable to making some decisions that are informed by reflection, discernment, values, conversations, community, mentors. And in that, again, at the end of the day, if you get it, great, go get it, go to Oxford, do whatever, it's wonderful. If you don't, great. We're happy that you went through this process with us. We hope you learned something. We hope you can take that into the next place. I don't think that many other fellowship offices like they might have that kind of fundamental foundation, but I don't think they live, breathe, and die by it like we do. So if you want to do something together, you want to compete, you want to go for it, you want to develop, that's what we want. We want people that want to work on them. We're going to invest so much in you. We want you to like care about your path as much as we're going to put into you. And that's why, yeah, we're going to get in a bit to like what the work that's involved. We're going to talk about that. But again, we start with the process because this is what you are signing up for. If you want a nomination at Georgetown, we want people that are in it for this process of development. Okay.
And there are other spaces in which you would be participating in this kind of developmental work. I mean, people who go through this process often say like, I wouldn't have the same kind of clarity if I hadn't gone through this. So this is an exciting opportunity. Once again, it requires that kind of commitment because we want to commit to the people who are committed to the process. And we are here for you. So TLDR, if you were here because you're like, oh, the Rhodes, that's so prestigious, I love prestige, this is not the place for you. We are about the process and what you put in and what you get out. Okay. So some first things first, because I know you are here because you have an outstanding academic record that speaks to, I think, your kind of commitment and the ways in which you've explored your discipline and disciplinary issues in the classroom. But there are also some other kinds of criteria here that are important to take into account. I mean, the first one, the basic one, is eligibility. So of the ones we're talking about today, Rhodes, Marshall, and Gates Cambridge, they all have different kinds of citizenship requirements. Marshall, you have to be a US citizen to apply. It's a scholarship that's celebrating the relationship between the US and the UK governments. Rhodes, there are a number of different constituencies. So there's the US constituency, but then there are a number of other constituencies for countries around the world. And then even for the countries that don't have their own Rhodes constituency, there's a global Rhodes category in which you can apply. So basically anyone here can apply to the Rhodes and find the constituency that works for them. We will still have you go through our internal endorsement process, even if you were applying to one that's not in the US constituency. And then finally, Gates Cambridge, which once again, anyone of any citizenship can apply to Gates Cambridge. But so you first want to be thinking about those kinds of basic eligibility requirements. Then the next thing is the academic rationale. So this gets into my thing about like, if you're here just because you're like, oh, that's prestigious, I would love to have, a nice little thing on my resume. Once again, this is not for you. Need to know, how are you going to make use of these programs in the UK? What is it about the academic experiences you would have, the training, the professional experiences that will get you closer to your larger vision. So why this program? How is this going to further your development in certain ways? Academic history, do you have the experiences and the record that support and corroborate that kind of narrative, that indicate the achievement that you've already had, indicate that you've been focusing on kind of particular issues that you imagine animating your kind of future in the UK and beyond? How have you cultivated the expertise? Because these fellowships are all looking for people who've engaged deeply through their coursework and through other kinds of experiences to showcase that future impact. Lauren, would you want to jump in with the other ones?
Yeah, where are we at? Leadership?
Leadership.
Yeah, sorry. I was definitely paying attention. All right. So the puzzle piece is very like, I'm just transfixed on that. It's very like cathartic. See it up? Oh, it stopped. What happened? All right. So I think one of the first things is really thinking about your fit for these, right? These are some of the higher level ways that you need to think about categorically. Is this a, when we're talking about eligibility and we're talking about fit, we're talking about, is it a good investment of your time and our time? Now, that sort of sounds like kind of contradictory when we're like, it's this process, everybody should get to do it. Yeah, that would be great. And we would love for you to ask Georgetown to just make it available to everybody and have hundreds of fellowship advisors running around. That would be awesome. But the way that this works is that our time is limited. And so, you know, what we're going to really invest in those that have the greatest sort of fit. And when we're talking about fit, we're not talking about just because you have 4.0 or something like that, like, oh, you're a good fit. Not at all. That's one element. Academic work, you know, all these sorts of things are little elements. Don't undersell yourself as well. Like, I think sometimes it's hard. We get students that are like, you know, hit us up freshman year, I want to go for a Rhodes. And we're like, okay. Like that comes so much later. Rhodes is, again, it has this reputation of prestige that it's hard to actually find what the Rhodes now is looking for. So sometimes those that say, oh, it's probably not for me because it's so prestigious, they're not right either. So it's kind of a hard thing assessing your fit. These are some ways we want to help you think about that. One of the most important things that I think can be challenging, either to think broadly and dynamically about, or in the fact that this is probably lesser represented of the qualities and characteristics. If one was to say, you know, what do most candidates not have? Most candidates have a lot of these other things. Most candidates have a hard time like shaping that leadership experience. Now, leadership is amorphous. It can mean different things for the different fellowships. And so we can talk about that a little bit later in terms of like what would be a leadership experience for the Gates Cambridge and how that might differ from the Rhodes. But you are going to be able to have to kind of design a candidacy and a pitch that highlights academic interest, you know, your academic interest in the degree program as a tool, your academic history as someone who has been able to have success in your academic endeavors. But then there's this piece around leadership and being able to say, like, you know, the funders want to invest people that are going to make the most use of it. They want people that are dynamic, that want to use this opportunity to advance their cause, to make a difference. And you have to be able to sort of show you have some of those features through past leadership experiences. So sometimes that doesn't automatically come to you. Like maybe you didn't just like yesterday, you know, found Sweet Green and are like, you know, whatever. You know, like leadership can be so many different things, but you really are going to have to think about the caliber of your leadership experiences in relation to the opportunities that you're interested in applying for. And personal fit is I guess the intangibles, you know, kind of like why you're doing it, what kind of personality you have. You know, there's a lot of different things that go into this, into building out a dynamic cross-disciplinary open discipline cohort for the funders of these things. And so some of these is like kind of just leaning into who you are, and we hope to help you be able to shape that as well. Is that what you're thinking about personal fit, Laura?
Yeah. I mean, I would say like the takeaway, once in like the TLDR version of this slide, if I was going to say like two things to note here, one is how have you engaged deeply around the issues that you care about, whether that's through coursework, research, other kinds of internships, whatever that might be. And then also, how have you engaged your communities? because as Lauren mentioned, they're also looking to build out a cohort of people. They're looking for people who are kind of budding experts in their respective spaces, but they're also looking to build out a cohort. And how can they tell who would be a good member of that cohort? Well, who has previously engaged in their communities and however that's, like whatever that's entailed. So those would be kind of like the two things that I'd be thinking about in order to kind of like assess fit for any one of these opportunities, because all of these fellowships have the mission of like enacting social good, contributing to like the larger community. And so they want to see that kind of record or demonstrate commitment in your experiences to date.
Here's the TLDR.
Oh, another TLDR.
This is the TLDR. There's like a square. Past is prologue. Next.
Oh, there we go. Thank you. Yeah.
I'm on some Shakespeare.
We're just going to continue synthesizing ourselves.
Okay, yes.
Okay. So now we're going to provide an overview of the respective fellowships. Obviously, there's like a lot more that we could say about any one of these opportunities, but we want to give you enough of a snapshot to determine, is this something that resonates with you and that you think, like start to think this might be a good fit. So the Rhodes Scholarship is, in most cases, a 2-year fully funded graduate program at the University of Oxford. Oftentimes that becomes 2 one-year master's degrees. There's a possibility that you could apply to do a DPhil, which is basically like a PhD in the States, but in the UK, it takes less time because you come in with already kind of a sense of like what you want to work on. But there are cases where Rhodes might fund you to do 3 years in order to complete a DPhil in your field. As I mentioned earlier, there are different kinds of constituencies that select scholars for the Rhodes. In the US, they select 32 scholars, and then other constituencies, there's like the Pakistan Rhodes, the China Rhodes, South Africa Rhodes, each select a certain number of scholars to go to Oxford. And this is Rhodes House, which is a really beautiful place, but this is where the Rhodes Scholars come together for kind of like programming. I mean, they have speakers from around the world who come and speak to the Rhodes Scholars. So it's a really kind of vibrant intellectual community. And each scholar is doing their kind of respective academic program while at Oxford. Rhodes is really interested in that cohort and the people who are going to be the future change makers. Their big thing, their mantra is like fighting the world's fight. Like how in your field around your particular issues are you going to make a larger difference and better mankind and womankind? So finding those leaders from around the world. In terms of criteria beyond what we already talked about, I mean, academic excellence is really important. I mean, oftentimes we find those who have 3.85 and above are, in terms of like, once again, there are like lots of different dimensions here, so I don't want to make any hard and fast rules. But 3.85 and above generally makes you more competitive, as long as those other kind of components that are there as well. Of course, there are always kind of some exceptions to this. And then also looking for people who, once again, have demonstrated impact already in the work that they've done through their undergraduate experience and beyond. Rhodes does have an age cutoff, so that would just be something to pay attention to. We should mention, I think everyone here is a current student, but we do work with alums. So like potentially like a year out from now, you could say, oh, like it wasn't quite the right moment for me to apply to one of these fellowships then, but I'd like to apply now. And we would work with you and you'd go through our internal process. But with Rhodes, you just have to be careful because there is the age cutoff with the Rhodes. Okay.
If you're interested in applying for the Rhodes, yeah, I want you to take some time now to look at the history of that scholarship and the person for which it's named.
Yes. Always like know the larger context of things that you were applying for as well. Okay, Lauren, take it away.
Okay, so we have the Marshall Scholarship. Those, and we'll get into this in a minute in terms of the details for how do I determine if I should apply for one? Can I apply for two? So, hold those questions in your mind right now. The Marshall, like the Rhodes Scholarship, is offering you graduate funding. However, there are two sort of primary differences kind of at large that impact potentially your interest in applying for these. Number one, Marshall Scholars are only available to US citizens. The Marshall Scholarship is the UK's gift to the United States for the Marshall Plan. It's run out of the Foreign Office. So there's a lot of information about the administration of that award, which they make publicly available, since it's sort of like, you know, what would be akin to like the Fulbright in the United States. It's a government program, right? But they're bringing and offering scholarships to American students to come and have you know, a world-class educational experience in the United Kingdom, and to then also experience the culture, the British culture, to continue to grow our ties with our ally, essentially. What's different, again, about this one compared to the Rhodes, you can only propose degree programs at Oxford in terms of what you're getting. The Marshall has a much wider range of opportunities. You can propose degree programs as long as they are accredited graduate degree programs at institutions in the UK. You can pretty much go, you know, you can pretty much look at all of the range of programs and institutions available to you. So the Marshall typically funds 2 years. There are options for a 1-year Marshall, although those are extraordinarily rare that they give 1 year out. If you remember, you know, since this is also sort of a cultural program, it's a nation building program, you know, together, you know, coming together with our, you know, allies, essentially, they want you to spend some time there. So 2 years is really what they're looking for, so you can have that full immersive experience. Sometimes, also very rarely, they'll allow you a 3rd year if you're doing one of those 3-year doctoral level programs. But again, that's rare for them to offer that. Really, most people are going for 2 years. Now, in the United Kingdom, as in a lot of other institutions of higher learning in Europe, academic degree programs at the master's level typically come in sort of 2 sort of, you know, tenures while you're there. You have the 1-year master's program, which is a full master's program that you complete in 1 academic year. Those are often taught courses, so you're taking a lot of coursework. You'll probably have some sort of written product at the end, a thesis, whatnot. But that's very distinct and different from the MPhil or 2-year programs, which sort of combine coursework with a larger dissertation, a larger research project in the 2nd year. So you'll have to start thinking about, if you want that educational experience in the United Kingdom, Marshall can be a really good one because you can kind of mix and match. You can mix and match institutions, and they kind of, in some ways, encourage that, especially if you're choosing to do 2 1-year masters as your proposed opportunity. You could do a 1 year at Sussex, and then you could go up to St. Andrews and do a 2nd year there. You could do 2 different degree sort of disciplines that intersect with your core work, and you could really build out a cool set of experiences through the Marshall by looking at tangential, connected, you know, interesting plans. So we can get on to all that at a later date in terms of like the strategic selection, but we want you to really consider looking at programs outside of Oxford, Cambridge, and LSE. Those are like perennially applied to. So many students want to go to those institutions and are not as aware of the other and, you know, amazing programs outside of that kind of golden triangle, right? So if you can kind of get out of that space and look at the other programs, you'll also potentially enhance your competitiveness, because Marshall isn't going to pick all of their 50 to 55 scholars in a given year all to go to Oxford and Cambridge, because they want Americans to have a diverse experience of the UK. They want a diverse subset of American students going to diverse schools in the UK. So this one could take a little bit more research, because you have all of the United Kingdom to look at potential degree programs that might fit your academic needs. So outside of that, what are they looking for? They have a little bit more flexibility in terms of GPA, although, you know, I think that there's a GPA creep quite a bit here. While 3.7 is the floor, typically we're seeing the 3.8s and the 3 kind of high 3.8s onward be the kind of mean in terms of like at least Georgetown students that are selected for interviews. So, you know, that's a part of the conversation. Again, if you're in the 3.7s, we have had people have successful tenures and selections in that range. So please don't exclude yourself, but you need to understand kind of like what that competitiveness looks like in the larger field. Leadership potential is there. It's a little bit different than potentially the Rhodes and how they conceive of leadership, although there are some overlaps and that kind of thing. One of the important qualities and characteristics that they'll be looking for in the Marshall is this component called the ambassadorial potential. Rhodes does not have an interest in, hearing about like why the UK potentially is like this place of cultural exchange and it has a value that's, maybe tangential to your academic experience. Like they're less about that. But if you think about the Foreign Office in the UK is administering the Marshall, you're going to have to respond to an essay about how, you engage in the community or what you're going to get out of it or why this is a really good place for you to learn from some sort of UK system perspective. So that's a part of this as well. And that makes it a little bit distinct from what the Rhodes is trying to do, which is essentially, really just getting the best scholars in all the fields to Oxford, right? So they have a little bit more of a holistic kind of review and selection criteria by which they'll be evaluating your application. And indeed, there's a lot more writing in that application than there is in the Rhodes. Again, you need to have conferred your bachelor's degree by the time you would begin your tenure as a Marshall Scholar. And you have 3 years after you graduate of eligibility to get endorsement from Georgetown and move forward and apply. After that, you've sort of, I guess, aged out or cycled out and are no longer able. So again, come back to us, in a future application cycle. We work with alumni like you were enrolled. Like we don't make a distinction. If you're eligible and you get nominated, we're working with you, right? There are no age restrictions. It's about like how many years out from your undergrad experience you are. Again, you have to be a US citizen. And there's also a play here that's like you get nomination for Rhodes or Marshall this year as a rising senior, you apply, kind of first semester senior year, maybe it doesn't work out, but you have gone through the development process with us and then you can reapply and you have more years of eligibility. So there is also like a longer term strategy here where you might apply for a Rhodes and a Marshall, maybe you also apply for a research Fulbright, and maybe the Marshall and Rhodes don't work out, but then you go do your research abroad for a year and then you come on that credential and you reapply, and we already know you because we work with you for a year. We have had several people, I mean, both of us have had people we've worked with that have gone again and been successful in the second time. So that's also there too. One of the questions that we get is like, when should I apply? If you think this is a good thing for you, these are competitive. Apply as many times as you are eligible and interested and competitive for one of these things, okay? So don't wait for like the prime time. If you're interested now, you probably would get a lot more while you're an undergrad, like, and you're not like with a day job or something like that to connect and work with us. So I know that kind of got us off topic, Laura, sorry, so I'll stop.
I just have like 2 additional notes to build upon what Lauren said. The ambassadorial potential, again, I think we often hear people who think like, are thinking about ambassadorial potential in a very kind of like narrow way, as in like travel abroad. Like when have you traveled abroad and done like kind of like international exchange work? We're thinking about ambassadorial potential for Marshall in terms of how are you going to make connections in your field and whatever your field looks like. What interesting things are happening in the UK, you could take back to the US, like, and vice versa is kind of how we're thinking about ambassadorial potential. And then with regards to the degree program, the 2 potentially 1-year master's degrees anywhere in the UK, I think the thing to emphasize here is it allows you to be very creative and how you're thinking about your own academic training. I think sometimes people think like the Marshall Scholarship would be like their terminal degree. Like if they want to go to law school, like they'd be going to do like a very specific kind of like legal like program, or like the people who potentially in the future want to go to medical school, like they're doing medical training. Like, no, that's not really the way to think about this, as much as what is the training that's going to complement the expertise that you need or want to continue to pursue. So if you want to go to law school in the future and you imagine doing work for like the DOJ around like educational equity, perhaps on the Marshall, you could go do like an educational, like a justice type of master's program. So it allows you to be kind of like really creative and how you're thinking about your own training. Okay. And then finally, Gates Cambridge. And so the distinguishing thing here is for both Rhodes and Marshall, you have to go through our internal process. The fellowships want Georgetown to determine candidates of best fit to put forward. And so that's why we have this internal process in place. For Gates Cambridge, you apply directly to Gates Cambridge. There's no internal process that we have at Georgetown. However, we still support students who are applying to Gates Cambridge. The deadline for Gates Cambridge hits in October. And oftentimes, if you're thinking about applying to Rhodes and Marshall, you might think about kind of like reworking some of those materials to then apply to Gates Cambridge. For Gates Cambridge, this is funding a degree program at the University of Cambridge. So that could be a master's program, that could be a doctorate program, like a DPhil program. They are increasingly indicating preference for those who are interested in doing doctorate programs, just because, as Lauren mentioned, they want people to be around for longer to establish that kind of sense of community in a cohort. And so if someone's only going for 1 year, it's harder to create that sense of community and cohort. So if you are interested in doing a master's at the University of Cambridge, could still certainly are eligible and could apply. They are, though, increasingly leaning towards wanting to support those who are going to be there longer. The Gates Cambridge is supported or funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, once again in the interest of working towards a larger social good and improving the lives of others. So open to individuals in any field doing any kind of program, but who are oriented around and dedicated to that kind of like larger mission, however that might be in your field. The thing with Gates Cambridge is you will have to I should say the application to Gates Cambridge is basically the application to your degree program at the University of Cambridge. There's just like a supplement to that application to indicate that you were interested in applying to the Gates Cambridge Scholarship, and you complete an additional essay as part of that application. And then, as we mentioned earlier, it's open to citizens of any country outside of the UK. Similarly, looking for kind of the intellectual record and achievement, and then also kind of leadership and social impact. Okay. So here's a nice thing. You could go punting over here, have your strawberries and cream. Nice kind of like leisurely activity while you're studying at the University of Cambridge. Okay.
Okay.
Do you want to spend time on this, or do you want to just go to the internal app?
Yeah, let's go to the internal application, because I think that's what's probably most relevant.
Okay. So this is just kind of a snapshot of what is needed for the external application, but since we're not even at that point, you have to complete the internal application first. We're not even going to worry about the external application.
Yeah. So the way that nomination or endorsement works, so essentially, as Laura said, a lot of these foundations or grant makers are like, hey, you run the first kind of review and selection process. We call it the nomination process. That way you're sending us just the sort of students that you've already identified are, putting the time into their applications, are a good fit, meet those eligibility criteria. So first, before you can apply or even get to a place outside of the Gates Cambridge, remember, you can apply directly to them. You don't need to go through us, nor can you necessarily get endorsement. But in order to apply for either the Rhodes or the Marshall, you first have to get nomination through the Center for Research and Fellowships. And that's why you're here, is to learn about that process, right? And also to determine whether or not the Rhodes, the Marshall, or other fellowships are appropriate given your interests in the kind of postgraduate space. So then if we're looking at a timeline in which the external application would come due, in the earliest time that you could apply would be like the October, that would be the external deadline, the late September, early October of your senior year. So that means if you're a junior right now, this would be your first time to kind of jump into the application cycle. We have invited a few sophomores to this. If you're a sophomore, just be here and listen. That's great. We also would encourage you to think dynamically about how you might use that sophomore to junior summer that's coming up to really think about building out the leadership and community element. Okay, so we'll set that aside. But let's talk about this application cycle. What do you need to do to apply and get nomination this year, to apply later in the fall, and to go through the summer with Laura and Lauren on a lovely journey of building out your future career, to you can have your mom send us cards about how amazing we are to help you with your identifying your path. We make moms happy all the time. All right, so the internal deadline is essentially going to be due your application materials on June 1st so that's this summer, right? So you have a few months. Now, what is required in order to get nomination? What materials would I need to submit and have submitted on my behalf in order to be reviewed? And we'll talk about the review process and the selection process in a second. So no matter which of these you want to apply for, and we're talking right now just about the Rhodes and the Marshall, because those are the two, remember, that require our sort of endorsement, right? So if you find programs and you are interested and you find a nice path at both Oxford and in other areas in the UK at other institutions, you can apply for both. Or maybe you're not seeing yourself as competitive for the Rhodes because the Rhodes will require 8 letters of recommendation and that just sort of seems not feasible at this point. You can apply for just Marshall nomination. So it's lesser likely that people just apply for Rhodes nomination, although we welcome you if you have the right rationale to do that. So you're really thinking about both or one of these. In either case, the application is the same. The only thing that is different if you end up applying for a Rhodes is that you have an additional 4 letters. So really, no matter what, we'll talk about all the things that are required. So it's either 4, if you're only at 4 letters of recommendation, sent to us by June 1st, information in a bit, that would be substantiating your internal application. If you want Marshall and a Rhodes, you need 8 letters. Do your Marshall letters have to be distinct from your Rhodes letters? No. These are just letters of nomination for either Marshall or for Rhodes and Marshall or for just Rhodes, depending upon which of those you have identified as those that you want to seek nomination for. So we'll take questions about letters. We always get those. We need them all at the time of internal application. Your recommenders would be sending them to us at fellowships@georgetown.edu. Outside of that, and you want to start thinking about who you might identify now, start having those conversations now before the semester ends. Outside of that, your materials that you need to get together for us are going to include, kind of like an application form with biographical details, information, which one you want nomination for. We will ask in that application for you to propose some degree programs, like, I'm looking at this program, at Bath, and I'm looking for my second year to do, a program at Warwick. So whatever, right? Those are going to be required so we can kind of get a sense for what you want to do with the Marshall and the Rhodes, your degree programs, the skills you want to build. But also, you want to do your homework here. You want to pick really solid programs, but I would say at least 50% of the students we end up working with after nomination change their degree programs after we get into the process of candidacy development. So you're not locked into those programs at the time of internal application, but we are going to be able to assess more clearly your fit by how dynamically and how thoughtfully you have selected your program. So be considerate in how you're thinking about program selection for internal nomination, but then realize on the other side of it, when we start working, if you doing more research, you find something else that's better, we actually might look at this and suggest something later in the process, like, hey, did you consider this degree instead? All that can change up until the final deadline, right? So begin your research.
And we're doing a webinar on that too.
Yeah, we'll be doing development, kind of webinars to help you, give you some strategy around how to pick programs. So there's more content coming on that. Up to a 2-page resume. And then we have a really exciting new thing that we're doing this year. We work with you guys after you get nomination extensively on the writing, and Rhodes doesn't allow us to read your writing, but it doesn't matter. We have a mechanism by which we work on writing outside of that application. So we'll suspend that piece for now. In the past, we have asked questions around what do you want to do and what problem are you focusing? What's your issue that you're bringing to the core of your candidacy? What do you see in the future? We're going to do that this year, but this year we're not doing it in writing. We're doing it in a multimedia narrative, right? So what that means is we're going to send the listserv an opportunity to sign up to come to a candidacy hackathon that we're going to run, and we're going to help you
Super
design.
Fun. Bring your own snacks.
I know, it's too bad that you can bring your own snacks. We're gonna have so much fun, or it's gonna be forced fun. So it's fun for us, and maybe
we create our own fun anyway, though. So it doesn't
really fun for this group. I know. And we're gonna design and help you design a candidacy PechaKucha. Who knows PechaKucha? Anybody knows what PechaKucha is? Ha ha! Excellent. You can Google it.
Oh, someone does.
Oh, someone does. Philippe knows. Well, he'll be using that next year since he's a sophomore, but that's fine. You can come to hackathon now and draft it out if you want. But we just want to see how you're thinking. This allows us to also explore other modes of presentation that I think are lesser developed. I think the visual imagery, the narration. So basically a PechaKucha is a timed PowerPoint presentation that flips an image every 20 seconds, and you get 20 seconds, 20 slides to make your pitch. And we're going to help you like unearth the material. So we're not going to like just send you out to make 20 slides and you have no idea. We're going to say, you know, this is the core things that you need to be thinking about. We'll take you through that workshop. We'll give you like some prompts to help elicit some of the, you know, elements around your candidacy. And then you're going to have a discrete amount of time after the workshop concludes to put together your Pachacucha. I don't know how to spell it, so someone else, maybe someone else.
It's not just a narrative of your like family vacation. It's actually a narrative that is focused on the kind of questions that we're interested in.
Yes, so it's not like, you know, if I could get the same thing scrolling through your Instagram, I'm not really interested. Like we need to see, so it's not the food pics, unless maybe, I don't know, if food pictures are your, I could see as how that could potentially be an issue.
An analogy, no like onions, like I'm like an onion.
Yeah. So, and it doesn't have to be pictures of yourself. It could be how visually a problem works. Like, you know, we want to be able to, it doesn't, also if you're like not artistic or whatever, that's fine. You don't have to, we're not going to judge you based on like, oh, okay. And we're not judging you actually, we'll get into this in a minute. We don't sit on the selection committee. That way we can, you know, help you design everything, let you have the best shot at getting your materials out there. Then you'll be evaluated by our committee, which is comprised of our past recipients. So, you know, we've had a lot of marshals, however many, 20 or 30, whatever, you know.
We were #1 in the nation this past year, no big deal.
In BD. Did I say that right? In BD, yes, I did. So we, after a few years, after our scholars have been out a little bit, we invite them back to come because they know the experience. They know what Marshall and Rhodes are looking for. And also sometimes they identify like themselves and as someone who has an interesting intersection with your line of work, and mentorships happen. And it's just been a really fruitful way to have outside readers that really know the scholarship and that are not us work through the nomination process. And that allows us to be, you know, if people are working with us intently, you know, showing up to the hackathon and asking all the questions, that's great. Like we don't sit on the committee. So there you go. Or someone
your dream weavers and coaches.
Yes. What did you say? We're a dream weaver?
We're dream weavers.
This is good. This is good. I like this. This is a new way to characterize our work. But it's fun. We just want to see how you're thinking. And I think that one of the things around the application when we're like 500 words on this and 500 words on that and 500 words on this is that we have to break all that down anyway. Once we get you into the real, you know, development part of this, we're going to really sharpen your writing, especially as it's related to your pitch. And all of those materials sort of become ancillary and not as necessary and sometimes inhibitory to like allowing you to do the drafting and the writing that's going to be most compelling. So here we just want to like have a little more fun, and it'll be great to like, I don't know, spend some time. Laura came up with the idea of a hackathon and I'm like, yes. And then we just had to make it work because like, I just like the branding of that. It's like candidacy hackathon. Excellent.
That's always where great ideas come from. Just like, you know, like we like the words.
You know, okay, I know it's like the pandemic has been hard, y'all. Like we've been having to reinvent things to keep it fresh.
Okay, we'll move on. So here's our timeline, just to give you kind of a sense of what the next however many months look like. I think you're all subscribed to the listserv, so great job. I think we've all accomplished that step. In April, we will, I guess we're already in April. Wow, we're already, what is today? The 8th? Oh my God. In the remaining 3 weeks of April, we will be doing developmental workshops. So we will be doing one on, excuse me, selecting your programs, kind of like strategies for finding the ones that are a good fit for you. We'll be doing one on selecting and supporting recommenders. So all that's coming. We want you to start thinking about this now, but we will be offering additional support. May 7th is going to be the day of our really fun, super fun candidacy hackathon, BYOS, bring your own snacks. We will be sending out a link to RSVP for that. And as Lauren said, that's when we're going to help you understand and kind of like frame your candidacy, think about how to do your Pachacucha, which is also just kind of fun to say. And then June 1st is our endorsement application deadline for Rhodes and Marshall. Our committees review those applications, and then generally we're able to let people know whether they've been selected to move forward by early July, early to mid-July. And then at that point on, we work very intensively with our endorsed candidates up into the external deadline, the first one that hits the very end of September and like early October. And then interviews, if people are selected to interviews, happen in late October is really early, but generally November. We have January here because that's when like Gates Cambridge does their interviews, but like Rhodes and Marshall are like November time for interviews. Okay. And then next week is our super important problem versus issue workshop, where we're going to help you think about what are the issues to which that you have examined and explored, and that you want to be one of the core aspects of your future work and future career. So we're going to help you next week think through how to identify kind of what your issue is, which is once again core to your candidacy and how you're thinking, and will be important for your multimedia candidacy narrative that you will be doing for the internal application. Okay, I think we have some questions. Oh, you just sent out the link. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, so there's lots of content coming. If you're not able to make the May 7th, and we'll have more information about how to RSVP for that. That's fine. We're going to have instructions for asynchronous, kind of like how you would go through the steps to design and build that out. So all of the workshops that we're going to be doing between now and then are going to also be aimed at like generating the material that would help you design the multimedia presentation. We can open up to questions. Yeah.
In the meantime, I'll just like briefly show you, especially for our folks who might be in different Rhodes constituencies. If you go to the Rhodes website, you can find out which countries have their own constituencies, because each of these countries are also going to have their own requirements. So the US constituency for Rhodes requires 8, but I think China requires 5 letters of recommendation. And you can find that out by going to your constituency, reading about your information, the information for candidates, which will outline exactly what is needed for your respective constituency. So you will be following those guidelines. If you are in a different constituency, you still need to be applying by June 1st though, in order to make sure that you can go through our processes. The Marshall Scholarship, you can begin getting insight into eligibility. So if you go to the Marshall Scholarship website, go to apply, there is, no one really should be paying attention to 1-year Marshall, because as Lauren said, that's extremely rare. So most people will be doing the 2-year Marshall Scholarship. This will also tell you there are certain degree programs that you are not eligible to pursue on the Marshall, and this will also outline all of that as well. So to get additional information about that, you can go to the Marshall website. And then of course, crf.georgetown.edu is our website. We will continue posting the links to our webinars and workshops on our page here. I think some of the ones from last year are even on here. If you're like extra excited, you could just like maybe go check those out. But we also have a fellowships toolkit with some additional resources. And then if you were interested in Rhodes and Marshall, chances are you might be interested in some of our other fellowships. And so we encourage you to spend some time browsing the other fellowships that are out there. And then if you find ones that interest you, you can email us to get on the respective listserv.
Yeah, we had a question come in about recommenders, like what types of recommenders are ideal for these? Do they have to be professors, or do they have to be from Georgetown?
This is one of probably our frequently asked questions, and this is also one we'll get like dive deeper into. I know you don't like the word, you don't like the phrase dive deep, because we're not really diving into a pool. But anyway,
it's delve that I have a problem with.
Oh, delve. Okay, we will not delve. We will dive deeply into this question in our recommenders workshop. What's important to know now is that the most important consideration with who to write letters of recommendation for you is who can write an enthusiastic detail about your accomplishments, credentials, and potential for impact. That should always be the #1 consideration, because a template letter of someone who just says like, this person showed up to my class, raised their hand, participated in a few discussions, and like that's the letter, that is not going to do you like any good. You want someone who's actually familiar with what you've done. You should never have peers write for you. Like that will never be taken seriously. You want professors or people who have supervised you perhaps in an internship or research assistantship or something like that. So someone who has the authority to offer, that will be taken seriously. For Rhodes, I think it's 4 of the letters have to be academic. So people who have either taught you in courses or supervised you in research. With Marshall, actually, I think all 3 at this point, we're requiring 4 for the internal deadline because we need to see who your team is. But if you were selected for Marshall, we will only be submitting 4. And those really do need to be kind of academic in nature or like an internship that allowed you to further cultivate the kind of credentials and skills that would be applicable to kind of degree programs that you want to do. The reason being that if you are selected for one of these fellowships, these are the materials that Marshall is sending to the degree program to get you into the degree program. So they need to know that you have the qualifications to get in. So that's why, especially for Marshall, there's going to be more of an emphasis on the academic piece. For Rhodes, at least half of those letters, if not, it's either 4 or 5. I forget now which one, whether it's 4 or 5 have to be academic. But those are just kind of things to get you started now. And then of course, we'll dive more deeply into this in our recommendation webinar. Any other questions?
Yeah, hold the date for Monday the 19th at 4 p.m. That's where we're going to do a whole thing. You can come by with your questions or get more information about how to choose recommenders. And more importantly, that workshop is not just about like, teasing out which ones to select. We'll also talk about how to cultivate relationships with faculty so that you get better letters and how that process might intersect with the offices, like our work with your recommenders if you're nominated. So there'll be a lot of information coming out during that workshop.
Will, I think you were first in the questions.
Awesome, thanks. My question is just about, in terms of program selection, if you have an interest in things that you've kind of strongly demonstrated in your life outside of school, but you haven't directly studied them, is it ever precedented that people will apply and get, grad school, like let's say biology or something, haven't taken coursework in biology, but you have like a deep demonstrated personal interest in it? Is that something you would apply for, or should you stay in the lane of things you've studied in school?
So there's probably a lot that we could spend discussing about this. I think what's important is to understand this is all about kind of like logical fit. And so what kind of determines logical fit? Well, there are 2 things that determine logical fit. It's what do you hope to be doing in the future? And how will this degree program further lay the groundwork to get you closer to those particular goals? And then also, how has what you've done to date through your academic professional work set the stage for doing this degree program and setting you on that path? So both of those pieces need to be there in order for something to be persuasive in terms of kind of your narrative, your candidacy. If like the degree programs, we're not choosing them just because like they sound cool. We're choosing them because like, once again, they're going to further your academic professional development in specific ways that you can discuss. And so I don't know if we have the time here to go too much into the detail for like your particular case, but this is definitely something that we can further discuss in advising about like what will make the most sense for you. But those are like, it's both the looking forward and looking backward to see like, do these pieces fit together in that way?
And you have to be very careful that you can get into your degree program. Like you have
Right.
prerequisites that program, given their system, would work. And since the UK educational system is a little bit different from the US's, where students sometimes specialize at the undergraduate level in a much more, kind of focused way than the kind of liberal arts education of a traditional undergraduate American experience with the gen ed requirements and so on and so forth. Sometimes students have found, even if they've had some coursework like in STIA or whatever, and then they want to go and do a harder science, sometimes that would be fine. Sometimes that might be a problem. It depends on the program requirements. So you kind of have to be able to identify your eligibility for those programs. And if the program would allow you to go in and you get kind of a good sense that you have the necessary training and background to be competitive for the program, then it's more about like the why you want this. And the Marshall wouldn't push back against something that might be a little bit more avant-garde with what you're presenting, so long as like that has a good rationale and you could get in given the prerequisites that you'd have.
Mm-hmm. Ella, you were next, I think.
Yeah, so I know, I guess not for the Rhodes, but for the Marshall, if you guys were talking about expanding past Oxford and Cambridge, and I know that the Fulbright has a bunch of institutions that you can study at, and I'm guessing there's some overlap. So, if you want to study in the UK, when would you do a Fulbright? When would you do Marshall/Rhodes? What sort of things are you looking for either?
Anytime you could get one of any of those three, you take it.
Right, but like for applying, like which one?
Yeah, all of them when it matters. Like if you have the time. This then kind of goes to this idea around like, since they're competitive and they're all kind of doing similar things, like you're kind of going, like and getting a similar experience, even though your candidates for each of the fellowships that you choose to apply for would be different and nuanced and like, situated based on what that fellowship is looking for. If this is the time for you to go get advanced training and it makes sense to do a Rhodes and a Marshall and a Gates Cambridge, then yes, of course, go apply for all three. Just be very careful about how much time these applications take, although there is something that's like, once you've kind of done one, it's a little easier to roll over and do a couple more. You would not be excluded in terms of or you would not be harmed in terms of your competitiveness to cast a wide net. So we have had people do a Gates, a Churchill, a Rhodes, a Marshall, Fulbright, like a Luce. I remember someone did all of those, right? And like that's a lot. That there's a lot of science ones in there. So if you're not scientists, don't listen to Churchill and whatever. So the question then becomes, is the Fulbright UK, even though you're applying for Rhodes and Marshall UK, is that the best use of your Fulbright bid? So Fulbright will allow you to choose only one application, but they'll send you all over the world. If you go to the if you go to the UK on a Fulbright, you're not going to be competitive for a Marshall or a Rhodes because you've already had a UK experience. It's just going to tank your competitiveness. Also, going to the UK Fulbrights are so extraordinarily competitive. We have more of an ability to support strategic applications for the Rhodes or the Marshall more than we ever do for the Fulbright UK because it's a crapshoot, right? Like one applicant per year out of the 70, 80, 90 people that apply to LSE get selected for that program. Like your statistics are like likely better if you have strong features that would get you into LSE to apply for a Marshall through the LSE, but that's besides the point. So we try to discourage as much as possible, like just opting into the UK Fulbright as a way to kind of do the UK experience. Now, they have very particular degrees, like if you want to do drama at, Goldsmiths or something, and like that has been your thing and you absolutely fit, let's do that application. But like, the serialization strategy where you do a year research, like that's going out and going into the field. Like I guess the model here is like Steffi Bryson, who applied for Rhodes and didn't get it the first time, but then she went to China and did like did research on the African diaspora in China and then applied to the Rhodes and she got the Rhodes. Like that's kind of a strategy again, but you see how that trajectory, she was deepening the research skills, deepening expertise, deepening leadership, deepening like, the situated problem in country. So if she had gone and done, a master's program in the UK and then I tried to apply to the Rhodes, I'd be like, what have you been doing? You've been in education, like, no, right? So the Fulbright UK is just such a, that's like the black box where it's like, the algorithm goes in and you don't know how it functions. Like that's the black box of Fulbright. It's like, yes. It's like, when the plane goes down, they have to pull that thing out and they still don't know how it went down. That's like how I feel about the Fulbright UK. We're not here for a Fulbright information session, so I don't know why I'm going on about that. But there's lots of other ways to maximize your competitiveness if you want to do a Fulbright and a Rhodes and Marshall bid in the same year, and it will likely exclude you opting into the Fulbright UK.
Okay, Neil.
Hi. So one of the things I heard a lot in your presentation was that leadership and community were important aspects of an application. For science, how do you demonstrate those?
I mean, I think so one thing that I would emphasize is that leadership looks different for different kinds of of people is one thing. But then also it's looking to see like, well, how have you applied your research, or you're kind of like translated your like learning and research outside of the classroom and outside of the lab in some ways. So Lauren, you may have more examples because I feel like you've worked more closely with like scientists recently for Rhodes and Marshall.
Yeah, I was trying to think about like Seamus's leadership. I can't remember what he focused on in his leadership application, but I think that like sometimes leadership is also, if you're in a science, like publications is a way to demonstrate leadership. Or there's also like very challenging ways that like team-based research, like science is, functions. And there's ways in which there are stories of, you know, integrity or stories of challenge and overcoming that can be thought about, like the leadership qualities that make for, you know, kind of like, you know, a very thoughtful scientist. I think those that do any sort of translational work where, you know, maybe you also are writing kind of for public audiences about your science, like those are ways to talk about like, and you want to go to the UK to do a degree in policy so that you can come back and do a medical degree or MD, PhD, but have this like skill set that communicates across like the science and non-science communities. Like there's ways to think about those as leadership experiences, or women in STEM, you know, the science march, leading people down to do science march, stuff like that.
Yeah, I was also going to say that when we're talking about leadership and how these fellowships are thinking about it, it's not just like having a president of a certain organization on your resume. Like these fellowships don't care that you were like the president of an organization if you were just kind of like maintaining the status quo. They want to know like, what are you doing that's contributing in some way? So it could be like you were a member of germs, and like something about like in terms of like how you were thinking about like serving patients or serving those you were responding to, like that was adding something of value to your community. So I think there's always an opportunity to think creatively about leadership. I mean, once again, the key thing is like, how are you engaging and not just doing something? I mean, like with research, as Lauren was talking about, with like publication, at least is like translating that in some way or engaging larger community in that scholarly conversation. So I think there are a lot of different ways to think about leadership. So I wouldn't discount yourself if you think like, oh shoot, I haven't been like the president or vice president of an organization.
And sometimes those are just like suck your time, and you haven't been able to flex your leadership too much when you're, you know, I mean, club presidencies and stuff like that are not going to have a lot of traction as like the core thing that they're looking for. It's much more dynamic for you to have like, you know, tried to run for city council, epically failed, and use that as your leadership experience than it ever is to sort of say you successfully got president of something here at a club. Like outside activities too are like hallmarks of like thinking outside of the system, getting engaged. If you have opportunities this summer, embed yourself, think about dynamically, and also whether it's for the fellowship application, you know, or not, maybe this gives you the opportunity to think in that way and engage your community in a way that's like, well, these are important features and I don't have as many of those, so let me go experiment with that over the summer and, you know, like get outside of the sort of the Georgetown bubble. And I mean, it's, you haven't been in the bubble for a while, I guess. You're all bubbled in all sorts of places, but you know, there is that kind of element of everybody has an opportunity to kind of have a leadership position on some club at Georgetown. How are you going to be different in terms of what, you know, and I'm not diminishing that experience. Maybe you did turn a club around, but those are harder. I guess Sally Matson, who is a Marshall Scholar right now, wrote her leadership essay on being like IT person for the Corp, you know, and like how there was a lot, and that one was much more about personal challenges. It was like, we had a customer service problem where the IT team was not functioning well with the core administrative apparatus of the Corp, and like blah, blah, blah. And here's what I was thinking and did. So it's like showing her as sort of like a person amongst like, you know, given her technical skill set and how she was thinking about those interpersonal dynamics, and that became the substance for her essay. So, you know, again, you don't have to have like, you know, I mean, it's hard. I think it's really hard, and it's very dependent on discipline and what you've done with your time and what kind of leader you are. There's people that lead from the front, there's people that lead from the back.
And part of this is why like the problem versus issue thing that we're going to talk about is so important, because a lot of this comes down to like the future vision, which becomes the anchor point, and understanding what are the kinds of like the philosophy of change or philosophy of leadership that is necessary in that kind of space, and then thinking about how have you cultivated that or demonstrated that in the activities in which you've been involved previously, in order to like build out this really kind of coherent and interesting narrative. But yeah, we can come up with lots of kind of quirky examples of people's leadership examples that might surprise you initially, that they were like leadership examples, but it was like kind of in terms of how they conceptualized that in a way that seemed impactful and was making a difference in their communities.
I think we're going to call time, but we're going to have lots of opportunities for, you know, asking questions, coming to workshops. We appreciate you spending your time and going over with us a little bit. Hopefully you're good managers of your time, and if you needed to go to class, you're not now 8 minutes late. If you are, you should leave immediately. Sorry,
But we'll see you maybe on Tuesday. Once again, like Tuesday will be our next session. We'll send this information on the listserv too, and you guys are all on the listserv, so that's great.
Until then, be well.
Bye.
Get a vaccine.
Thank you.